A single fingerprint solved this 30-year mystery. It was the smallest detail in the entire case file. A single fingerprint smudged, almost invisible, left on a fragment of broken glass. For 3 decades, detectives stared at that mark, ran it through databases, and got nothing. It became the symbol of failure in a case that haunted an entire town. But in 2023, that tiny print, forgotten, misplaced, and later rediscovered, would bring justice to a family that had waited half a lifetime for answers. This isn't just another cold case story. This is about how one microscopic trace of identity can outlive decades, deceit, and even death itself. By the end of this video, you'll understand how modern forensics can resurrect the truth, and how one person's smallest mistake can expose a killer who thought they'd escaped forever. Police Scarlight, the case begins the night of the disappearance. The story starts on March 19, 1993, in the quiet lakeside town of Clearwater Ridge, Oregon. 24-year-old Emily Carter, a local art teacher, left a friend's birthday dinner just after 11 p.m. She texted that she was almost home. She never arrived. The next morning, her car was found abandoned near the woods, doors locked, her purse still inside. There were no signs of a struggle, except for one shattered headlight and that faint partial fingerprint on glass. Detectives combed the area for weeks. No body, no witnesses, no suspects. Just that print. But in 1993, fingerprint databases were still local, and the digital tools we rely on today didn't exist. The case went cold, and stayed that way for 30 years. In 2022, a new investigator, Detective Sarah Nolan, 34 years old, sharp, methodical, and obsessed with cold cases, took over the Clearwater Ridge archives. Nolan was fascinated by unsolved disappearances. She spent weekends combing through old evidence logs, and one rainy afternoon, she found the Carter box. Dust-covered, mislabeled, but intact. Inside was the crime scene photo of Emily's broken headlight, and taped to the back, a small, aged glass fragment wrapped in plastic. On it, still visible under the dust, was that faint print. To most, it was a dead end. To Nolan, it was a challenge. She sent the sample to the state's digital forensics lab, where AI-enhanced fingerprint imaging could now reconstruct partial smudges into nearly complete prints. What came back changed everything. After 30 years of silence, the system pinged. Match found: Robert Bobby Leland, a name no one had seen in the Carter file before. Leland was a construction worker, 59 years old, recently arrested for a minor burglary in California. When his fingerprints entered the system, they linked directly to that 1993 sample. Detective Nolan was stunned. Leland had lived in Clearwater Ridge in the early 90s, and at the time, he was Emily Carter's neighbor. When police dug into his past, they uncovered more. He'd been questioned back in 1993, briefly, but had a solid alibi. He claimed he was out of town for work. The police believed him. No one checked his time cards. No one searched his garage. Now, 30 years later, that same fingerprint said otherwise. Police arrested Leland quietly at his home in Riverside, California. When they searched his garage, they found a locked trunk, sealed with rust and time. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings about Emily's disappearance, and a bracelet engraved with her initials, EC. DNA analysis later confirmed what everyone feared. Trace evidence on that bracelet matched Emily's profile. But the true horror came when they uncovered soil samples under the trunk. The composition matched the Clearwater Ridge lakeshore, the exact area where Emily's car had been found. Leland confessed within hours of interrogation. He'd offered Emily a ride home that night. When she declined, he followed her. The confrontation turned violent. A push, a fall, panic. He'd hidden her body near the lake, and later buried the remains deeper as years passed. When asked why he kept the trunk, his response chilled investigators. "I needed to remember what I'd done so I wouldn't do it again." The case went to trial in late 2023. The courtroom was packed: journalists, locals, and surviving members of Emily's family. The fingerprint was the key evidence. Experts described how the oil residues and partial ridges from a single touch had survived decades of heat, cold, and neglect, long enough to expose the truth. Emily's mother, now in her 70s, spoke directly to the jury. "For 30 years, I prayed for one sign. That fingerprint, it was her voice." Leland was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But Detective Nolan didn't celebrate. She stared at that photo of the headlight, realizing how fragile justice can be and how one overlooked detail can rewrite history. The Carter case became a national example of how modern technology revives cold cases. It reminded detectives everywhere that no evidence is ever too small, no lead too old. Forensic specialists now call it the fingerprint revolution, a shift in cold case investigation that combines AI imaging, advanced ridge reconstruction, and national data sharing to solve what once seemed impossible. But more than that, it's a story about patience, persistence, and how truth waits quietly in the smallest places. At Emily Carter's memorial in 2024, her family placed a restored antique clock at the site where her car was found. It was stopped at 2:47 a.m., the time her last message was sent. As the wind blew across the lake, Detective Nolan whispered, "We finally stopped the clock for good." The case was closed. But one question lingers for all of us. If one fingerprint can solve a 30-year mystery, how many truths are still waiting to be found, hidden in the dust of time?